I'm Vicki Hogarth, and welcome to Southwest Magazine. On today's show, we're having a roundtable discussion about community transportation solutions. Joining me today are Sharon McGladdery of Charlotte Dial-A-Ride, Briana Cowie of ECW, and Raymond Funk of the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission. Thank you all for sitting down with me today.
Thanks so much for having us, Vicki.
Raymond, let's just start off by talking about an overview of ways in which in rural Southwest New Brunswick we have come up with innovative solutions for people who might not have a car.
Yeah, well, I think we'll get to it with our guests here, but one of the biggest ways has been Charlotte Dial-A-Ride. They've been operating since 2005. And so they've been doing this community transportation work for a very long time. And then we also have ECW Project Village Car Share, and more recently Kari Rideshare is in the region. And then kind of my role with the Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission, we recently have also been given the new mandate of regional transportation. So some of that carries over from previous work that Vibrant Communities Charlotte County was doing in collaborating with Dial-A-Ride. And so there's a 10-year history of Vibrant Communities doing that work, and then that migrated to the Service Commission. So.
And Sharon, for that backstory on Dial-A-Ride, what was the inception of this, and where did the idea for it come from?
It was actually a Fundy Community Foundation initiative, which was a community survey of the needs that weren't being met in the community, and transport was front and center of that. So we formed a not-for-profit organization from that with volunteer drivers to try and meet the needs of people in our area, especially the more remote rural areas, to connect them with the services they needed. So that's where it started. And we were incorporated in 2005 and have been working since then, and very closely with Southwest New Brunswick Service Commission.
Now, since you have that long history to go on, can you tell us a little bit about the growth of it? What areas do you serve, and how has it grown over time, both in terms of users and drivers?
It's grown immensely over that time, to the extent that we are fully subscribed. We now have 2 dispatchers working in the office, and we did over 8,000 rides last year, in 2023, with 23 volunteer drivers, just to give you an indication of the demand. Mostly it started off earlier with health appointments, but what we're finding more and more now is for work and for education purposes is taking a stronger position in rider needs. So we operate with a membership, which is quite unusual, where people who want to access dispatch services pay a monthly fee, $5, or an annual fee of $60. And that gives them access to our dispatchers to match them up with volunteer drivers for their needs.
Now, how does, there is compensation for the drivers, so I know that there's often calls out to look for new drivers in the community, and that's how these services often grow and get better and bigger. How is a driver compensated for participating in the
drivers who use their own vehicles, they're compensated 46 cents a kilometre, and that's from their home door, doing their drives, and back to their home door. So it's enough to help with gas, but the volunteers put their own maintenance and other costs into their vehicles, so that's what we work with, is the 46 cents a kilometre.
And it does also seem the volunteers themselves gain a great benefit from helping out in the community and the relationships that they build along the way as well.
Yeah,
so.
It's very special volunteers that will pick up strangers, get to know them, and you do get to know them over a period of time. So there's definitely that, and yes, they have to go through rider audit or abstract and other backstops to volunteer, but yeah, that's what we do for them.
And definitely pre-Uber, when you think about it, it really was an idea that came out of a need that existed in the community, and Kari is filling in that Uber gap, and we're going to talk about that in a bit, Raymond. But before that, Briana, I want to talk a little bit about ECW and your launch of Project Village, but specifically the e-car share service. When did that start in the community, and what made ECW feel like this was an important mission to accomplish and bring to Southwest New Brunswick?
Sure. So I think some historical context is ECW and myself personally was invited onto the Southwest New Brunswick Transit Authority Board by Stan Chopdani in 2018. And at that time, Dial a Ride and the Regional Service Commission also sat on that larger committee, and it was a group of about 10 to 14 volunteers in the region who were really trying to look at solving large-scale transportation challenges. And through some funding that they received with the Environmental Trust Fund with the province of New Brunswick, they had Dillon Consulting do a integrated public transportation plan. So ECW, because of our specialization with like environmental and greenhouse gas mitigations, also did a sort of sub-plan looking at greenhouse gas reduction models based off of all types of different transportation scenarios. So we used a lot of dial-a-rides data at that point, as well as some of the data that Dillon had collected, which was really wonderful to kind of understand where the gaps were currently, what the reliance was on their own single passenger vehicles within our region, and then kind of looking at different ways to fill that gap. So that's when we decided at ECW, through our Project Village model, which was looking at transportation, housing, and food security, to kind of look at creating a car share model that was being done in rural communities in Quebec as well as rural communities in northern New Brunswick. So we had applied for a funding application with some support from our local community partners, and that's how we access those 4 electric vehicles. And it's been up and running now with more uptake in the last year and a half, and only in the last 6 months we've already driven about 60,000 kilometers. And we continue to service people and hope for complimentary services to both Dial a Ride and to Kari. So it's been going really well.
Tell us a little bit, Briana, about where those cars are located and how the recharging works.
Yeah, so we have one in the town of St. Andrews, which is by far our most popular one. So we're seeing a lot of uptake with newcomers in our community, as well as individuals who just kind of need it as is to be able to access different areas of, St. John or Fredericton or whatnot. We also have some in St. Stephen, and that's been helping to serve the community there, one in Blacks Harbour and one on Graminan Island. So it's been really exciting through partnerships with the Economic Social Inclusion Corporation and the Regional Service Commission. We've been able to help provide the cars for free to other nonprofit organizations. So I think a lot of people don't understand that it's very easy for nonprofit organizations to run out of a transportation budget very quickly, especially if they're servicing all types of vulnerable populations and needs. So for instance, we have a partnership with the Blacks Harbour Community School. So oftentimes what would happen there is the food coordinator would be kind of going through and burning through her transportation budget within a 4-month period, and then she'd have to take money from her food budget in order to offset her transportation budget. So by us being able to provide the vehicle for free, it's not cutting into that very important need for food for the children. So.
Wow. And can you tell us a little bit about cost and how it works?
Yeah, so we actually just recently removed the need for police clearance. We were noticing that that was a massive bottleneck for individuals. We actually heard a lot of people having trouble obviously accessing the RCMP offices in St. Stephen because they didn't have access to a vehicle. So we removed that recently, and you can sign up for it online on our website. So it's projectvillage.ca.
Wow. I know that we are parked here right outside the St. Andrews location, and I can't tell you how many, especially MBC students, it's really incredible how much we see them using it, whether they're going to get groceries or just do errands. Raymond, can you tell us a little bit now about Kari? We're filling in all the all the connected pieces in our community. Kari is a new launch. It launched in St. Stephen and then just I think last week launched in St. Andrews again. So we're seeing this Uber-like service come to our region. There's been such a call for this. It's sort of without a taxi service too. This really fills a need. Tell us a little bit about how it's working, and for people who might not know at this point what it is.
Sure, and I should say too that the folks responsible for really getting it launched was Future St. Stephen, Jeremy Barham. So he's not able to be with us today. So I'm going to fill in as best I can some of those gaps. But so we know like Dial a Ride is providing this really unique service for folks who don't have access to transportation and can't drive. Project Village Car Share are folks who have their license, they just don't have the car. And so Kari, what it's doing is providing this kind of on-demand taxi, Uber-style service folks who need a ride, within a short time frame, they can call, they can see if there's a driver available, book that driver, and then get to their destination. So it's one part of kind of like a suite of different solutions that we need for transportation in our rural community. So Future St. Stephen kind of invited Kari. Kari is a web-based platform, two guys in PEI, so a maritime, built and run organization that found that this app worked really well in PEI. So Future St. Stephen thought, well, let's see if it could work here. We have the need. And so they're giving it a go. They're currently in their 6-month pilot project with St. Stephen to get the uptake and really make it go. And like you said too, it's just recently expanded. Those of you who are residents of St. Andrews probably would have seen some of the conversation and the proposal to really find how it could serve the need here in this community. So so I think it really does fit a niche and a need that currently is not served. And so when I first heard about this possibility of Kari coming in from Jeremy, Future St. Stephen, one of the first things that we wanted to do, and Jeremy included, was connect with the organizations already providing transportation services. So the Service Commission pulled together Sharon and Julie from Ride and Briana from Project Village Car Share, and we all met together to see, okay, how does this work? Are we competing? Is this complementary? And at the end of the day, we saw no, this is actually really complementary. There's certain ways where Kari can fill in gaps that Ride can't, and they really work well together. And we can, if we have time, we could unpack that too. But even just the fact that Ride, in order to kind of get all the details lined up for the driver and the rider, they needed 48 hours to be able to book. And that's just to be able to make sure that they can have a reliable service for their members. Well, what happens in that shorter period between the 48 hours, if somebody needs a drive, 2 hours from now or 10 hours from now or tomorrow, or maybe they need it right now, Kari is now able to actually fill that gap where they'll be able to provide the service. So
it is working like I have Kari, I have the app on my phone. I am actively trying to sign up drivers.
Yeah, great.
But does it work like, let's say Uber, I was just overseas and was using Bolt, and it is so cool to just press a button and have a car come to you, or at least show you what's available.
Yeah, and that's how it works. So you do have to have an app on your phone, a smartphone. So that is one thing that you probably will need. And you kind of put in, when you need the ride, where you are. It's, St. Stephen or St. Andrews are your options right now. And then you'll be able to see a list of drivers who are available. And I think as it's in a growing stage, it may not have the ride that you want like right now, but you can at least see what's available, and the more we use it, the more will become available. So, but I think it's as simple as that, right? It's just, you have the app, you kind of punch in when and where you are and when you need that ride, and then you get to see what drivers are available, and they show up. Kari has a pretty strong policy around their drivers as well. So they have certain expectations. So you shouldn't be waiting around for, if you've booked a time, you shouldn't be waiting around for a long time for your driver. Like they'll need to be there. The car will be totally legitimate, insured, clean. The driver has been vetted. So I think people should be able to really be able to trust that the service will be of good quality. And so yeah, I don't know.
You do know more about the driver of something you would use an app for than, let's say, hailing a taxi in the old school ways of. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges? I know that signing up drivers was a challenge, but drivers are compensated as well with Kari, and it could be something, I should touch on that first, that you could actually make a full-time living off of if someone was interested in being a driver in the community.
I'm not an expert in that, but the drivers definitely are compensated for sure. I think they take a certain percentage of the drives that they fulfill. So so it's incentive for the drivers to be fulfilling those drives and to actually be able to make some earnings off of that for sure. And so, yeah, for those of you who are looking for rides, there's the rides. But those of you who are looking to drive or find some part-time work, and I think, in Southwest New Brunswick, there's a lot of folks who are used to seasonal work, and like this could potentially be one of those gaps too, if you want to drive. So, so I would encourage you to to look up Kari, see what it takes to be a driver there, and yeah, go forward.
I'd love to open this up to discussion just in terms of the challenges with all three of you so heavily invested in figuring out transportation needs and finding those solutions in our community. What are the challenges you still see, even as you try to bridge those gaps between the three different ways of meeting needs?
Well, one of the bonuses we're already benefiting from with Kari is when we can't find a volunteer driver to meet a ride, or somebody phones up 10 minutes before they need the ride, we can refer them now to Kari. Also, if someone can drive, we can refer them to Project Village Car Share. So that's taken a bit of pressure off us. But again, as mentioned, it's different clientele fit the different niches, better or not. But yeah, we're already recommending alternatives where we can't meet them, or we think it's a viable alternative for the person who needs the ride.
Yeah, and I think another thing to highlight to the community is that through the Regional Service Commission, there are transportation committees that each of our organizations sit on, and we have been meeting more often and sort of addressing some of those other fundamental issues within our region. So things like having fixed routes, in particular subsets of our municipalities that we know are regularly used for work. Work continues to be a barrier for us to be able to continue to serve the community. And I know Sharon statistically is watching her numbers shift from health to work and so forth. So I think like trying to figure out innovative ways to solve those issues so that individuals don't necessarily have to pay an arm and a leg in order to make it to their place of employment is really important for economic growth and just for community vibrancy as a whole.
And it's all interconnected, and I think this is where Raymond's role is so important with accommodation and other pressures, where people are more remote from their workplace than they have been traditionally. That the call for transportation is stronger. So I think this upswing reflects some of that. So alternative options for people is really important to keep going.
Yeah, like one thing that we're discussing right now with the economic development arm of the Regional Service Commission and with Raymond in his department is setting up a fixed route link between MBCC St. Andrews to St. Stephen, knowing that accommodation varies in terms of cost and availability in both of those communities. So we're seeing a lot of students residing in St. Stephen, but going to school here. So how do we help to service that? And I think ultimately, with the data that MBCC St. Andrews has and that we've been collecting over multiple years now, we're able to kind of understand where those routes are, and then with more additional pilot projects, kind of building that out more and more. That could also be a similar route for work. For instance, a lot of people work in those subsequent towns, and St. Andrews to St. George as well.
And the other nice piece of that is people get their education or they get to work, they get a better chance at getting their own transportation eventually. So it's a bit like a pivot point to move forward. So we see that in the positive context because it has happened. So
yeah, one of the neatest things for us has been working with the Charlotte County Multicultural Association and having newcomers come in and having Class 5 equivalents from whatever country that they've come from or interprovincial travel, but requiring to transfer that over into a New Brunswick Class 5 license. But they don't have access to a vehicle, because building credit once you're a newly landed newcomer, it's quite challenging. So we're able to provide our vehicle for them to kind of do those lessons with their instructor, and we've actually had about 5 newcomers getting their New Brunswick equivalent of Class 5 through our program. So there's all kinds of little success stories like that, and just building on that more and more. But yeah, really targeting that work barrier would be would be a great next step for us to all keep working away on, I guess.
Yeah, and I think in so many ways, back to what are some of the challenges, in many ways we've seen transportation come up again and again and again in community whenever there's been some kind of study or workshopping on a report. So even with the Service Commission, when recently we've had these new mandates given, so economic development and transportation, community development, and as we were developing those strategies last year for each of those mandates, transportation and housing, those came up as some of the larger barriers, for economic development, for what would make our communities more inclusive, and so I think we've known for a long time that transportation can be a challenge for a lot of individuals, but without data, without trying some things and learning and trying to understand what's going on, it's hard to I guess quantify the need. Though we have lots of stories, lots of people's experience saying like there is the need. So I think the other benefit of working together and collaborating is we get to learn from each other. We get to share the data that Dial-A-Ride is picking up and that ECW is picking up, and we can use that together to make other decisions better decisions. One of the challenges that we do have in our area is it's quite rural, and in our region we also have the added dynamic of island communities. So when we talk about transportation, I also want to be really careful. Like, yes, we have Dial-A-Ride and ECW and Kari kind of represented in this conversation, but there's a lot of other providers in transportation in our region, and we could name a few. McAdam bus, a community bus, like that's a Huntsman, hop on, hop off. We have our ferry services, so there's a lot going on that makes it work for people to get from one place to the other. But that's challenging, and often we wonder, well, why can't we have public transit or those kinds of things, and like some other communities, it's like sometimes the challenge is also population density, and we also want to make sure that you're making the strategic investments, and you're making sure that you are making those investments with the best data that you can. So at the Service Commission, one of our roles that we've been slowly leaning into under this transportation mandate is gathering some of that data, trying to figure out how do we do some regional strategy around transportation, knowing that there's been many things that have been tried, there's many things that are running, that are working, and so our current approach right now is, okay, let's work with what's working right now and try to build the momentum more behind those, and build that collaboration. The Service Commission can be a great point for collaboration, having those conversations, bringing the data together, and convening the different groups, the stakeholders in that. So we're happy to have those conversations with other folks, and Briana mentioned too, there's a potential for committee involvement and that kind of stuff, and so that's a work in progress. That's growing again as we're trying to lean into what our role is in that transportation world. So without taking on too much, because you're trying to take it one step at a time. So other thing I did want to mention too, I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about, Vicki, but Briana also mentioned Economic Social Inclusion Corporation, and so I should say, like, Dial-A-Ride is one of the community transportation, the volunteer-based transportation service in our region. Well, they kind of set the model and the precedent for this kind of service to be offered throughout the province. And so there has been, because of that, there hasn't been some support from the provincial government to support volunteer driving services across the province, and so we're one of 12 regions in the province, and they're all kind of developing their volunteer driver services as well. But and call me biased because I am, but our Dial-A-Ride service has been above and beyond doing incredible work. 8,000 rides over this past year is exceptional, even in the province, and we're just
None of us were grey 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to underscore that
Yeah.
the objective of today's bigger conversation is that we are so supportive of one another, and that we want to empower each other to continue to be able to be different types of service providers and fill in those needs, and to have a star like Dial-A-Ride being able to have, so she's blushing, but seriously, to be able to have that as the backbone, and to have serviced so many communities, and to be able to have provided so many means of people to get access to healthcare, to get access to food, And I think that for us, we want to see that investment continue in services like that, like nonprofit models that are working, and to see volunteers sign up for Dial-A-Ride, and to know that they can have that rewarding experience interacting and engaging with people, and knowing they are making a difference. Sorry, I'll let you talk now, Sharon.
So one of the upsides of being around so long is that we have, and thanks to funding ESIC and United Way and others, is a database, which has been incredibly useful for feeding into the different questions. Briana mentioned, Eastern Charlotte Waterways, but definitely Regional Service Commission, for on-the-ground facts of where we're going, what we're doing, how many people are involved. And that's a blessing that we sort of fell into, and has been very useful for collaboration. And we do share it freely. Anyone wants 15 years of stats, they're welcome. It's roll-up information. It's not personal information, but it's been a great help for us, saying, really, we get monthly reports to the board of directors, so I'm the chair of the board, to see where we're going, where are new pressures, where things are changing. So that's where we saw the change, from health to work to education, was thanks to those stats.
I thank you all for coming in today. You're welcome back anytime to further this conversation. I think it's an important one to keep having, so thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having us, Vicki.
Thanks, Vicki.
My guests today have been Sharon McGladdery, Briana Cowie, and Raymond Funk for our discussion on transportation solutions for Southwest New Brunswick. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.